Ben, you lead the way.
I'll lead the way. We're going to go here and take a right.
Okay.
Okay.
I feel like I'm on the verge of something great.
Wow. That is phenomenal. The verge of something great. You're definitely our first guest to start the walk with a statement like that. So thank you very much.
I mean, I kind of want to end it right here and let's just stay on the verge.
I know there's a lot of pressure on us now. Okay, so Keith, who are we here with?
I can't wait to introduce you, Ben, to my new friend, Avril Speaks. Avril and I have just spent the last 3 or 4 days together, kind of working panels at the Doc Intensive with Austin Film Society. But Avril was recommended by friend of the podcast, Megan Gilbride, to our little system here because she comes to documentary and works in documentary in just about every way you can. She's a director, she's a producer, she's a showrunner, and she's a distribution advocate, which is something I didn't know existed and I didn't know I needed, but I do now, and I know that I continue to need. So we're going to get into all that. We're going to let Avril kind of speak for herself.
Thank you.
But I would just say that I have had so much fun kind of getting to hear her experience and point of view over the last couple of days, and I'm excited to share it with you, Ben, and share it with the very limited number of people in our audience.
On your left.
You're listening to Doc Walks with Ben and Keith.
So how was that intro? Did he cover all the bases?
Yeah,
it sounds like there's a lot to talk about there.
This April person, I don't know. I'd love to meet her. She's pretty
Teacher,
impressive.
provocateur.
Honestly, I think at the end of the day, I'm just a storyteller. Like that word storyteller, I just recently started embracing. I've always liked to tell stories since I was a kid in many different forms, plays, poetry, novels. And I think that I've always had this desire to do right by storytellers, you know? So that's like, I think that advocacy part has always been there in some form, in some way, shape, or form as well. It's always been like, but how do we get more people to do X, Y, Z? How do we help?
Well, you know what I'm so curious to ask you about? I was reading your bio, and one of the things that fascinated me is that you went to the seminary.
I did. I did.
We have not talked to a filmmaker who also is a... So are you a priest?
No.
No?
Not by any stretch.
Well, you must be a spiritual person if you did that. So could you talk about that part of your life?
Yeah. I first of all, I love that you found that because I don't talk about it a lot.
We've got an exclusive.
I don't talk about it a lot for many reasons. That's usually the first thing. Oh, are you a pastor? Did you want to be a pastor? And that was never my intention in doing it. It was strictly a curiosity.
Wow.
And also a curiosity, and also I kind of hit a crossroads in filmmaking where I was just like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And kind of thought, I was teaching at the time when I made this decision to go. I was teaching filmmaking, and I was like, maybe I'll just keep teaching for the rest of my life. Like maybe I'll make this hard turn out of production and start teaching. But I was like, I don't have a PhD. I should get a PhD if that's going to be my path. What can I study? What would I be interested enough to study for, 8 or 9 years or whatever? And the only thing that came up was film or theology. Like I'm interested in just what people think about God and faith and the universe and things like that. And I found a program that had both. It was a theology and film program. So I said, okay, I'll do that.
Wow.
And I
Where
went.
is that at?
It's in Pasadena in California.
Okay.
That's actually why I moved to LA, was to go to that program. But when I got there, it was great. It was probably the most formative 2 years of my life. But when I got there, it was very, like I said, I kind of went out of curiosity and also just being at this crossroads of kind of like, what am I going to do in the future? I'll be a theology and film professor. And then I took my first theology and film class.
Yeah.
And my professor did a whole like analysis of Moulin Rouge and how we can learn, how it can relate it to the book of Job. And I was like, what? Like it blew my mind. I was like, what are you talking about? But it was like so well thought out. Like, and that it was the type of program, it's like film. It's kind of like we were talking yesterday about cinema is like a church, you know, that's literally what that whole program is about, but it's like putting language to it. It's like all of the films that we gravitate toward for whatever reason, like no matter what the film is, it's saying something about who we are as humans and how we interact with the world and with the divine, like whatever that looks like for you, like it's saying something about like what's in your core, like what's in your heart.
Oh, interesting. So like in this, let me repeat that back so I make sure I understand. So in the same way that filmmakers say the subjects that they gravitate towards are subjects that they're working through in their own lives personally, films that we love are also speaking to that part of us where we're psychologically working through something similar.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things, like a lot of my storytelling background came through the church. But like as I got older and started getting into film, I've always kind of felt this sort of clash between those two things, because some of the churches I was going to later in life, it was this attitude of like, oh, that, you know, the movies are evil. Like it was like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, I don't believe that. So when I went to this seminary, it kind of gave language to everything that I had been thinking. I did this exercise. I went on this retreat one time, and this they had us list our top 10 films. Like, what are the 10 films that make you the most emotional? And like some of the ones that were on my list were like violent. I was just like, what is this saying about myself? You know, and it was such a span of films. Like I think Set It Off was on there. And he was on there. And I'm like, why Annie? Like,
Yeah.
Why? Why are these the films that come up?
Right.
Daddy issues.
Yeah.
Daddy Warbucks.
Which is like the least. I'm like the last I love my dad with all of my heart. But when we broke it down, it's like the scene that, in Set It Off, the scene that I start bawling. That last scene when Cleo gets out of the car and the police, I don't know if you've seen the movie.
It's been a long time.
But they like shoot, it's like a shootout with her and the police. And you think that she's dead. And then she like gets out like the last minute is like, blah, 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 like to the police. And I just start bawling, and I'm like, Clara.
Wow.
And you know, we really dug into that, and it was like, it's not so much that scene that makes me cry, it's that Cleo is the protector of her community and of those of that friend group. And she's the last one standing. And she's the one that's like, you guys go ahead. I'm going to take one for the team. Like there's always this theme that I keep grabbing to of taking one for the team.
Okay.
It's the same thing with Annie. I would start crying on that scene when Annie runs away from Rooster and she's on the bridge and Carol Burnett is like, Rooster, she's a baby. She's like, and then, you know, Punjab, which is problematic, but like Punjab comes in on the helicopter and Annie's like crying and she's like, Punjab, help me. And he comes down to help. But it's again, taking one for the team, because Annie is like sticking up for herself, but also sticking up for the other orphans.
Yeah.
So there's this constant theme of like taking one for the team.
You're a true advocate, right? The sacrificial heart to give of yourself for others.
Exactly.
I love it.
And so going back to the whole seminary thing, it helped me to give language to that. And so it was like, oh, wow, these films that I've gravitated toward, there's nothing wrong with those films. It's just that's how I relate to who I am as a person.
They're your
and how I
scripture.
relate to exactly.
Yes, it's all storytelling.
It's all storytelling.
To understand who we are, right? To figure out who we are. Ben, I'm so glad you asked that question, because now I need to go back and rewatch Annie. And set it off. How long were you in that program?
So I only lasted 2 years. I didn't go to get the PhD.
Yeah.
And so after 2 years, I just ended my journey there and went back into production. So I was there for 2 years.
I mean, it sounds like a real success story, though.
And that's why I say they were probably the most formative 2 years of my life.
Wow.
Because it really widened my lens on what stories I wanted to tell. And it just gave me that push to like, let's go back out and let's take this framework into production and into the field. I also felt like it was one of the first times in my life that all the parts of me were like, welcome to the table. It was like my Black self, female, Christian, like all of these things were allowed at the table and allowed to speak.
That's
And
very
I just felt
empowering.
really, yeah.
So the revitalization that infused in you, what did you do with that energy? How did you kind of like, what did you do?
I made a movie called Jinn.
Jury award winner at South by Southwest. What year was that?
That's right. We played Jinn in 2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for those who haven't seen it, tell us what Jinn's about.
Yeah, so Jinn is a story about a teenage girl whose life changes when her mother converts to Islam. And so it just follows their journey. The writer-director is Najda Mukmin, and it's partially based on her experience growing up. Her father was Muslim, and she wanted to capture that tension of, as a teenager, there's something very beautiful about this faith tradition, but also it's conflicting because she's 16 and she wants to listen to Little Kim and like go to parties and drink and do all these things and experience life.
Well, and that seems like such a natural film for you to make, coming out of a religious program to make a religious themed film. But I'm curious, you were coming out of a Christian program. What was it about making a movie about Islam that appealed to you?
I just related to it. Like when I read the script, I was like, this is probably the most relatable script I've read, for the coming of age story on someone's faith journey. Like I could relate to that, having grown up. I didn't grow up Muslim, but I grew up in a Christian home and had the same conflict.
Right.
Right.
Same questions are on the
Same
table.
questions, exactly.
And that's, so we talked about your many hats at the beginning. Mm-hmm. This is obviously as a producer. Mm-hmm. Is that your first major kind of producer role?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
The other times that I've produced, it's been kind of, I was director, producer, I was doing all those things. So this was the first time that I had the capital P producer position, was Jinn.
And how was that relationship with your director, having been a director, having worked, at that point you'd worked in both fiction and nonfiction, or just only nonfiction?
At that point I had worked mostly just in fiction.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how did you navigate the relationship shift to the work as a producer and not the director, and also supporting the director or collaborating with the director as a producer?
It was great because I had directed 2 features before that, and I think I had a lot of trauma around directing at that time. And so I wasn't trying to direct.
Right.
I didn't realize it was trauma until years later. Like if you would have asked me back then if I would direct again, my answer was no. I was like, I don't want to direct anymore. So it was fine. I was like, you do your thing. I'm here to support you. Like, I'm in the background. You know, because I had directed before, there were things that I understood and knew, and like used that as a means to support her and like advise, like, oh, maybe we should do this or that. So it was additive in that way. At least I think it was. But yeah, it was great. And it was also like one of the first times that I was able to work with someone else and, you know, just have that trust that like, yeah, you have a vision for this and I'm here for it. Like, I'm here supporting your vision, giving you full space to execute that vision, and also just like doing what I can to make that vision come to life.
Sometimes taking one for the team.
Totally. Totally.
That's what I always think of as the
Yes.
producer, right? Like, that's what I was getting at. Like, the producers, every producer I know who's a real producer has this switch that's available to them
Yeah.
to turn their ego on and off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And directors don't always have that
Yeah.
switch. It's kind of stuck on. And I respect that, you know, as I've gotten older, more mature in my career, I've started
Older for sure. Yeah, I don't know about more mature.
started taking on roles as an executive producer a little bit here and there. I haven't gone full producer for another director because I don't know how capable I'd be at seating space.
But you know, it's so interesting to hear you say that because it's like, I think it's interesting. Yes, I think there's a switch that comes on with producing, and I think I'm still learning how to switch that off and on. Like, coming back to directing, it's like, because I do feel like there is, as a director, you can't always take one for the team. Like, you have
Right.
to
No, that's
have
right.
the vision, you know? And I do think that that's a challenge for me sometimes, coming back to directing, is to turn that take one for the team switch off
Yeah.
and be like, no, this is what it needs to be.
That's what you want out of
Yeah.
your director, and it can come off as hard-headedness or stubbornness, ego. You know, you can be a real asshole.
Yeah.
But I feel like, at least I was filmically raised in a tradition where the director is the ultimate tiebreaker.
Yeah.
And because of that means the producer oftentimes needs to be the one to create the space for the director to kind of live there.
Yeah.
And sometimes the producer has to take a back seat to the director. Sometimes the producer has to take a back seat to the executive producer.
Yep.
Or the talent, right? Like,
Yeah.
you can't let the director be in the line of fire with the talent, or else you get director trauma.
Right.
I want to hear your thoughts on this, transported into the world of nonfiction.
Well, I've always liked watching nonfiction, but I think in terms of making it, that transition happened during the pandemic. It was a doc series that Discovery Plus picked up, and
And what was that one called?
it was called Uprooted.
And what was that about?
It was about a family whose brother had been killed in 1986, and they were trying to find justice for his death.
It's a very powerful piece.
Oh, you've seen it?
Well, I watched it in preparation when Megan first talked to us about you.
Oh,
I
cool.
watched your reel, and then it's very much the kind of story that I'm grabbed by.
Yeah.
Is a family trying to
Yeah.
come to terms with their past.
Yes.
And so I haven't seen all of it, but I saw. I wanted to get enough of a sense of it
Yeah.
to kind of just see what you're into.
Yeah.
You know, and then I also saw, not to switch too quickly because
Mm-hmm.
we'll come back to that, but you also have some work in the world of UFOs and aliens.
Yes.
That I was also impressed with. And I was like, ooh, there's a lot of overlap in my interests here. So,
So family histories and aliens and religion. You're covering all the bases.
I mean, they all kind of go together.
They kinda go, but you know, the aliens one, I wouldn't have thought that at the beginning. Like,
Yeah.
I kind of just got handed that show.
Yeah.
And like at the beginning, I was like,
Why?
why on the show? Like, what the hell? Like, And then, but once I, got into it, and also the thing is, I love talking to people and hearing their stories, and that's what got it for me.
I'm sorry, what show was this one?
Sorry, this was Files of the Unexplained,
Okay,
which is on Netflix.
gotcha.
And so you've been working as a showrunner on these series, but you're also directing individual episodes and producing the whole series, or what's the layout of that?
Most of the stuff I've been doing right now has been whole series.
Mm-hmm. Are you directing every episode then, or you're bringing in directors?
For Files, there were two of us kind of shared the show running and direct. Like, we kind of switched off.
Gotcha.
So she did 4 and I did 4. Like Uprooted, I did all of them. Mm-hmm. But then there's been other ones where it's like I've come in on different stages. Like one I came in post and like just show ran they had directors for each of them, and then I show ran that. So it just kind of varies. But I'd like to do more like I'll come in for an episode and just do an episode. I'd love to do more of that.
More of a traditional directing role.
We've talked about your theologian hat. Mm-hmm. We've talked about your director hat and your producer hat. Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little more about your advocate hat. What is Distribution Advocates, and what have you guys been up to?
It kind of started out as just a group of producers during the pandemic, like when everything shut down, like back when we were all sitting around like, how do we make movies again? Will we ever be able to go on set? There were like Zoom calls and stuff where people were having thoughts of like, maybe this is an opportunity to fix some of the things that are broken, because we have this time to sit out. And one of those Zoom calls was, a handful of producers, and the conversation just shifted to distribution. And every single one of us had a horror story or multiple horror stories about distribution gone wrong. And also, we're all sharing how much distribution is clouded in mystery. Because nobody talks about it. Like, people just don't share numbers.
Right. You're so focused on making the movie.
Right,
that
exactly.
What happens after that is feels very vague.
Exactly. And so we started having conversations about like, what could we do to fix that? And it literally started with us like, hey, let's put together a cheat sheet to help filmmakers. They can just go down the list. If they're facing a distribution deal, they can go down this list and help protect themselves. We presented it at Getting Real, and people said, this is amazing. Like, how can we bring this to our group? And then so other groups started asking us to come and present the cheat sheet. So it's 5 of us. It's myself, Karen Chin, Amy Hobby, Carlos Gutierrez, and Abby Sun. And Karen Chin and I, that first year or two, we were literally at like every film organization presenting this cheat sheet and doing these teach-ins. And, that's really where it started.
Did you have a way to fund this effort, or was it all volunteer? Or?
We actually had great support from Ford Foundation, from Perspective Fund, from Sundance, from Color Congress. We had a good amount of support that allowed us to do these teach-ins and also just to keep the program functioning, like operating. I remember at the same time also having conversations with a lot of these organizations about like producers and how there's so little support for producers. And then it's like, okay, what can we do how about we list producers in the festival program?
That'd be
just
nice.
Little things like that. So,
and so are you working with the Documentary Producers Alliance or or there's now a producers union, there's the Producers Guild of America. Are you overlapping with those folks?
A little bit. So if you think of us as kind of more like a think tank, especially now, because now once we like I said, we started doing those teach-ins, and at that time we were mostly working with organizations. So and also our grant only allowed us to focus on docs. So like we did one with DPA. We did like literally I think we did Big Sky. We just kind of filmed North. We just went around to a bunch of different places. Karen and I were just like, how can we make this information live somewhere? So then we did a podcast where we put the educational stuff on the podcast. Then we thought, how can we get back to our original conversations about change, like more systemic change? What needs to happen within the industry to help this be more sustainable for filmmakers? And so that's where those organizations came in, where they were like, oh, these are important conversations. We want to be a part and help you fund it. And so because those original conversations were about, how do we do this differently? We kind of were like, what are some of the fundamental issues that filmmakers face in distribution, marketing being one of them?
Yeah.
And so we came up with this idea of doing a marketing innovation fund. And so those organizations gave us support to fund projects that are doing experiments in marketing innovation.
Okay, so a little bell just went off inside of me because
Okay.
I heard you just say that you have a fund that funds projects.
Yes.
And I have projects, and Ben has projects, and the three listeners, hopefully they're still with us, have projects. How do we dip into that fund?
Yeah. So the way you dip into that fund, so it is a specific project for marketing innovation. And so what that means is we want projects that are looking at, if distribution companies were to do this is how this could change the industry. If theaters would do this, you know what I mean? So it's looking at like, if this one little part would change, we can have some systemic change in this industry. And so it's giving a little bit of money. The grants range anywhere from $5,000 to $50,000. And
Take it.
yeah. And we just want people to think about systemic change. The caveat I will say is that they do need to be films that are experimenting in some way as part of their plan with theatrical distribution.
Great.
And they should have a distributor attached. It can be, and we're primarily focusing on like independent distributors, just because we went.
That's who needs the help.
Because that's who needs
Yeah,
the help.
exactly.
Yeah.
And also, they're the ones most willing to do experiments.
Right.
There's not so much. And I mean, even if it's like you working with someone who used to work in distribution or knows the distribution space, I think our main concern is we want it to get done. We want there to be a mechanism in place for you to be able to execute the idea.
Well, what I love about hearing that, and I'm fully supportive of grants for new voices, and have played a role behind the scenes in some of those from time to time.
Yeah.
But for mid-career filmmakers, for risk takers,
Yeah.
with a track record,
Yeah.
this sounds like the kind of thing, when you say you have
Absolutely.
to have a distribution deal in place already.
Absolutely.
Some people in our audience are turned off immediately. They're like, well, how do you get that?
Yeah.
But the reality is, and people have a hard time hearing this sometimes, even when you get a distribution deal, it's still an uphill battle.
Yeah.
Even when you're mid-career and you have a couple good credits or people recognize your name in some way, it's still an uphill battle. It never stops being an uphill battle.
Totally.
So I love the sound of support for innovation in that, because it's not
Yeah.
just saying we're just going to give a boost to somebody who's already halfway there.
Right.
We're saying we're giving a boost to somebody who's got a track record, who's then going to potentially change things for everyone.
For everyone, exactly.
love that.
And the other thing is, to your point, these are people who, have some experience and also have some relationships. And so it's like, hey, let me contact who I know at CinemaScore and let's figure out how do we make our, festival box office count toward box office. Like, how can we work together to make this happen and to become the norm?
Well, and you're with, your work in distribution here. You're such an interesting person to talk about the state of our documentary business right now, because you've worn so many hats, you've worked in so many different formats. What are you seeing out there in terms of, documentary, just the state of documentary?
Tell us something good.
Crickets. No. I don't know. I think I am really excited about this fund that we're doing, because it's just kind of illuminating the alternative options that are out there. I think what's good is that I'm hearing so many more conversations about DIY, self-distribution, and not just self-distribution, because, I'm always on the fence about self-distribution. It's really hard. Like, it's not for the faint of heart.
Right, because you've already made the movie, and then you have to almost make the movie again by going out to show it.
And it's quite expensive, especially in this. It's like we're competing for eyeballs. It's very difficult for an independent. It's hard for, even if you have distribution, it's hard. Mm-hmm. And so let alone if you're trying to do it yourself. But that being said, it's encouraging that there are platforms that have sprung up. There are companies that have sprung up. There's many, there's just many ways to go that path if you so choose to. The fact that there's so many options for screenings. There's Kinema, there's Gather, there's Jolt, there's Film Hub. There's so many ways if you can come up with or dream up an idea on how to engage your audience. Like, each one of those platforms works differently in terms of how they engage that audience, and like how involved they get, how involved you have to be in order to make that happen. So I think that is an exciting thing. I also feel like I'm hearing so much conversation about audience now. Not that we weren't talking about audience before. We've always had conversations about audience and understood the importance of audience, but it does feel like there's an energy around getting in front of the audience and getting a community together to make a film, to watch a film. Like, I like the energy that's happening around audience building and doing that audience building from the very beginning. Like, to your point, not at the end.
Right.
Like, oh, I've done the film and now
right.
let me go find those people that I thought this was for.
Right.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that you have a rosy view of it, because as a showrunner and director on TV shows, I know how dire it is right now. And a lot of people that I've worked on those shows with have literally gotten out of the film business because they are used to going from show to show to show to pay their mortgage, and because the amount of shows being made have almost been cut in half. A lot of people feel like our industry is in this sort of inflection point where it's changing in a way where it's very scary for people. So I'm pleasantly surprised to hear that you're optimistic about it.
I was just talking to Megan about this last night. I was like, I don't know if maybe that's another iteration or another thing for distribution advocates or some other organization to take up, is like, how do we make more producers? We need more.
It's such hard-won information that makes a good producer. And it's like, I always talk to people about, if you've ever planned a large-scale party, if you've ever thrown a wedding, right? Or if you're the person that plans the group road trip, you're naturally a producer, and you've got 70% of what it takes already internally. But that last 30% is hard-won information. And so many producers that I know, my dear friend Megan included, don't have assistants, and they don't have a junior that they rely on, that they're kind of boosting up with them. And I wonder if that's like a way, is to encourage producers to have either an assistant or an apprentice or a junior level producer, an associate producer or something. So that there's a farm system.
I would agree 100% that there's not a mechanism or a system, or even just like thought-wise, not even necessarily like, oh, there's a program to have an assistant, but even just thought-wise of like having the next, like
Right.
who's the next in line.
It's almost like producers have that switch we talked about earlier that gives space to the director in so many ways.
Yeah.
But most producers that I know don't have that switch
Yeah.
that allows to take on help.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you take on help, you lighten your load, but you also educate.
right.
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 And it does seem like producer is a perfect role for like an apprenticeship. You know,
Yes.
that you grow younger producers up underneath you.
Totally. I feel like every project I do, I'm learning something completely different. And I'm
Absolutely.
like faking it. I'm like learning as I go along. Like, oh, I've never done that before. Let me figure that out.
But aren't we all doing that?
We're all doing that.
Rachel Grady had a great saying last night at the Q&A for Folk Tales, where she said documentary filmmaking is so hard because nobody's asking you to do it.
Yes.
Nobody cares if you finish. Most of the time, nobody's supporting you financially to do it. So
Yeah.
it really is this self-directed
True.
deadline that you're giving yourself that doesn't matter to anybody else until you make it and then go
Very
share
true.
it with
It's
the
very
world.
true.
Yeah.
But I also think that there's not a lot of clarity on what producers do. I know I didn't really understand what producers did until I became one.
You became one. That's right.
And
yeah.
because when I first started out, like when I went to film school, I went as a director. And because so many times when people just make this decision in their life, I'm going to be a filmmaker, the default is to be a director.
Right.
Or, sometimes it's writer or actor or whatever, but often it's, I'm going to be a director. Having taught for a number of years, there's been so many times where I've had students who are like, yeah, I'm going to be this director. And it's like, no, you really should be producing his project. Like I can see it written all over you.
Well, we're coming up to your hotel here and want to be respectful of your time. So, one of the last questions is that we hope that people listening to this are a lot of young filmmakers who are wondering maybe how to start out or, how to go about making their first project. So, what would your advice be for young filmmakers?
That would be my advice for young filmmakers. I would not be where I am today if it wasn't for people who had gone before me, like who had, been this path and were open and willing to say, like, let me help you out. Let me look over this contract for you and tell you all the things that are wrong about this.
Can I have that phone number, please?
Yeah, it's like, I think I would say find good mentors to help guide you through the process, even as much as, like we just said, a lot of it is you're figuring it out as you're going along.
That's such a great answer. And it's honestly the reason why we're excited about this podcast is like, it's easier said than done. Find a mentor, right? You have to be in the right place at the right time with a generous person. But you could also just tune into Doc Walks and get mentorship
Exactly.
from Avril Speaks.
Exactly.
Like, that's what you've just, I feel like, offered.
Thank you so much for doing it. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't talk about?
Ooh, what a good documentarian question.
That's a great question. You guys did a great job. I feel like that were some very thorough questions.
Oh, great. Thank
that
you.
hit on all the
It
things.
was a fun conversation.
This really
Yeah.
was. You're the first person to ever quote Annie on our podcast, and also to start it off with such a bang.
And I appreciate you cited the problematic nature of Punjab.
It's so problematic. There's so many things wrong. So many of those movies in the 80s you look back and
It's true. We've
Yeah.
come a long way.
Terrible.
It's important to
Come a
note
long
that.
way.
There's been a lot of progress made.
Punjab is not good.
Yeah.
It's so not good.
Yeah, but you are great, and I really
Thank you.
appreciate getting the chance to spend time with you, honestly, and just get to connect. Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. For Doc Walks, I'm Keith.
And
He's Ben.
I'm Ben. Thanks a lot, everybody.
This has been Avril. Bye-bye. Next time on Doc Walks. We're walking with visiting filmmaker Sandy Dabowski straight from their multi-city self-distribution extravaganza, with this year's Sabbath Queen. It's been 24 years since Sandy exploded on the scene with Trembling Before God. And in the last 2 decades, Sandy has picked up stories, energy, and ideas all about making personal films that confront society and bringing those films to audiences in your own unique way. They've got a lot of energy and ideas to share, and it's a pretty great walk with Sandy. So I hope that you will join Ben and me here at Doc Walks. Thanks. Doc Walks is created, produced, and edited by my friend Ben Steinbauer of The Bear.
Hello. And my friend Keith Maitland of Go Valley.
Thanks for tuning in.
Follow us at DocWalksPod on Instagram, X, and YouTube.